Welcome to my channel and welcome to this gemstone spiral ring tutorial. In the tutorial I'm going to take you through step by step everything you need to know to make this ring. If you enjoy the tutorial, please subscribe to my channel, and now I'm going to talk you through the tools and the materials that you need to make this beautiful ring. To make this design you're going to need some tools and materials. Now the materials you're going to need is a 0.8 wire and a 0.4 wire. I'm using copper coloured wire here in the design that I'm going to show you. You're also going to need 2 beads of your choice. Now the ideal size for this ring I found is a 3mm or a 4mm. It can be done with larger sizes, but obviously you'll get a different look. You're going to need a ring mandrel for sizing your piece and for working on. You're going to need flat nose pliers, wire cutter pliers, and a round nose plier for making the swirl detail on the front. Right, so let's get going. We're going to start making the ring with the base itself, and I've done a really simple wire weave onto 3 strands of the 0.8 wire using the 0.4. Okay, so I'm going to show you how I've done this. We're going to start off with 3 lengths of the 0.8 wire, and now these lengths are approximately sort of 13-14 centimeters long. Okay, and obviously the weave that you need to do is dependent on the size of the ring, and I'll show you what I mean in a second. Okay, so to get going, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a length of the 0.4. Now I'm using a shorter length for the demonstration, but what I tend to do is I tend to use an arm's length, and I find that does most sort of ring bands for me. Okay, so I'm going to wrap the wire around once, round one of them. Now this is just really for spacing, so if I pop in my second wire now, that wire that's in between will help to hold that space. Okay, so to start the weave we're going to wrap around twice around the 2 wires. Okay, and then come up in between those 2 wires, and because I've put that first wrap in there, it's allowed me to get that wrap nice and tight there. Okay, so with the second one I'm going to actually hold that in place, and I don't want to wrap this too tight because I don't want the wires to be too tight together. So again I'm going to wrap that quite loosely. See, still leaving a little gap there. Okay, so we've got our 2 now on the bottom. So we need 2 wraps now on the top, so we're going to come across the back and always wrapping towards us. So that's 2, that's 1 and 2 wrapping towards us. So to wrap the bottom 2, we're going to need to wrap towards us, so we're going to need to come around and through those top 2 and across the bottom 2. So that's those 2 again, and to do the top 2 across the back and through the bottom 2. So always doing 2 at a time with 2 wraps. Okay, so that's 2 again. So then we need to come up through the top to wrap the bottom 2. And you're going to keep repeating that wrap. Always remember wrapping towards you and 2 at a time, and you can't really go wrong with that weave. It's a really simple one, really nice one to work with. Okay, so I'm going to bring in the piece that I've already started. So I've got a section here that once I've wrapped it around the ring mandrel, okay, and go to the size that larger, or at least half a size larger than you want, because we are going to wrap around the band, so that will reduce the size. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to leave a gap here. We don't want too much of a gap. If I bring in the original ring, you see we've got a gap there in between the 2 woven bands where we sat the 2 gemstones and we've put a couple of spirals. Okay, so I'm going to sort of say that gap for me is fine. Okay, I'm going to take it off the ring mandrel, so you see we've got our shape of our ring and we've got our wires. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kink out the outer 2 on both sides. So I'm going to turn it round and do the same on this side. So do them one at a time so you get a nice clear bend There we go. Right, so now we're ready to add in our gemstones. So before we do that, I'm just going to put a little bit of a bend on that wire, on that side, and same on the inner one, excuse me, on the other side. So now we're going to add in our gemstone. And we're going to sit it about there. I'm going to pop in our other one. And the gemstones I'm using are, they're a 4mm. Between the 3 and a 4mm, I find sits better in this design. But obviously you can use whatever you want, really. It's totally up to you. And you'll just get a different look with a different size gemstone. Okay, so once we've got our gemstones in place, we want our gemstones to sort of sit like so. Okay, so we want this one to sit nearer, this one here to sit nearer this band, and this one here to sit nearer this band. And we do it like that. We sort of cross them over. When we do our spiral, we want our spiral to sit in this space here. If we put our gemstone up to here, we'll have nowhere for the spiral to sit. Okay, so we're going to do it sort of like that. So we've got a bit of space on either side. So I'm happy with that position. So I'm going to hold that just in position there. I'm going to take the wire from this side and pass it through the band. Okay, and I'm going to take some pliers just because it's easier for me to work with. And we want this wrap here to cover the end of the weave here. Okay, so I'm going to ring that around and make a nice neat wrap just there. I'm going to turn it around, and I always turn my work around because I find it easier for me to work in the same direction. Okay, so now we've got our next wrap there, so I'm happy with that position. We've still got our space here for our spiral, so I'm going to bring that through. Again, take my pliers, make sure before I make that final wrap on the top that everything is in position and over the top. Okay, so now our gemstones are in place. So now we need to tidy up this little section here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift that wire up just a little bit so that I can get my wire cutters in, and I'm going to cut off just short of the width of the ring band. Okay, I'm going to cut that off just short of the width, and then what will happen when I put my pliers in and squash that down, if I cut it the same width and then squash it down, there's a chance that I might have a little bit of excess on there, and I don't want that because we don't want any sharp edges. Okay, so again, cut that off short of the excuse me, short of the band. And again, I'm going to lift those wires just so that I can get my pliers in, and we're going to flatten that down. Okay, so now what we can do, we can pop that back onto the ring mandrel. Just make sure that everything is as we want it to be. Okay, so now what we need to do is the detail of the ring, because as you can see on this one, we've got our 2 centre gemstones, and then we've got a wrap over on either side and our little spiral. So now we're going to do those outer wraps. Okay, so I'm going to just make a little bend in the wire, just a little soft bend there, just so that it starts that wrap over, and we want that wire to sit at that point. So again, I'm going to hold that in position and just repeat the wraps here. Just make sure that this, you don't pull too tight and it closes up this gap here. Okay, so there we go. So again, I'm going to lift that up, cut that off, and always cutting off and tidying up as we go along. Don't leave it till the last minute because you're not going to be able to get your pliers in there properly. Okay, so again, make that little bend just to start off, just to start the wrap, so you get a nice smooth curve in the wire. And then we're going to bring that again, make sure that that's nice and tight and exactly where you want it before you make your final pass over the front. And I'm happy with that. So we're going to cut that off, and again flatten that down there. Okay, so now I'm happy with that. I'm just going to close in these a little bit and maybe just close that up slightly a bit more. There we go. Right, so now we've got our ring shank and we've got our detail on the top. So all we need to do now is our little swirl detail. Okay, so now obviously it depends how big you want them. I mean, we've got a gap here, so you can get quite a large swirl in there if you want to. I personally like the sort of the more dainty swirl, so I'm going to cut these down just roughly. I mean, you can measure them just to make sure you've got a swirl that's the same size. I'm going to bring in some round nose pliers and I'm going to pop the smallest point of the round nose pliers at the end of the wire, and I'm going to make a little tiny loop there. Okay, so then I'm going to continue that around and then I'm going to stop at that point and bring in my flat nose pliers, and at this point I can start to just grasp the swirl you've made there and turn the plier, and as you do that we're bringing that in. And actually this is probably a little bit large for me. I would probably want a smaller one. I would probably want just a little bit smaller than that. So to do that, all we're going to do is cut down a little bit more. Okay, so the shorter this is, the smaller your spiral is going to be. So what I would do is I would practice on little lengths of wire until you get a spiral size that you're happy with. I mean, if you've been making wire work for a while, then you know, you'll sort of know really the size that you want. Okay, but that's the finished ring. And if I bring in the other two that I've made, you'll see the design is the same, but each piece has a slightly different look because each wire work piece that you make is going to be slightly different. And that's the beauty of wire work, and that's the beauty of handcrafted jewellery. Every piece is unique and beautiful. So I hope you enjoyed the tutorial, and I hope you'll join me again for more. And if you like the tutorial, please subscribe to my page and come back and see more.